This is the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust's MHP Technical Assistance Ad Hoc Committee. And this is Wednesday, May 14th, 2025. It is 4:01 p.m. and we will begin with a call to order by roll call. Mary Hartman.
Here.
Rich Feely, not here. Julie McClure, not here. Stephanie Kroback.
Here.
Keith Bergman here. All right, so we do have, oh, there's Julie. Very good. Hello, Julie. I'm just doing roll call.
Okay.
Julie McClure, present?
Present.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And welcome back to Concord, even if virtually. Shelley Goering from Mass Housing Partnership. Very good. So our one item of business before we get to Shelley, that I had circulated a set of meeting minutes from our April 28th meeting. Rich, Stephanie, and I were in attendance at that meeting. I don't know that we'd have a quorum to vote on them, though. So I'll set those aside. If Rich joins the meeting, then I'll ask for a vote. So we'll come back to that. All right, now on to the main event. The Mass Housing Partnership Technical Assistance for establishing funding priorities and methodologies. And since our last ad hoc committee meeting on April 28th, our parent committee, the trust, had a further discussion on goals, which took place at the trust's meeting on May 5th. And you all got a copy of that revised goal document. I can put it up on the screen if you'd like, or Shelley, how would you like to walk us through this topic?
Could I actually share my screen?
Yeah, you certainly can.
That'd be great.
And you'll be in charge of making edits to your screen.
Yep. So I want to go through some of the changes that were made from your document, and I tweaked the language tiny bit.
Thank you.
Is it different than what we saw, Shelley?
It's so tiny.
Okay.
Very, very tiny. So one thing that or hi to everyone, I think Matt is newish for me, and there might be a couple other people that are newish. I'm with MHP, Mass Housing Partnership, and I do a lot of work with housing trusts across the state, as well as communities that are trying to establish housing trusts. So what we've been working on here is helping to identify a mission statement, goals, and strategies, and I'm encouraging us to be as measurable as possible, particularly in the goals. But I realized when I was opening this up this afternoon to review things, I was going to work on modifying the language in the mission statement, and I didn't do that yet. And so for the meeting on the 19th, presenting things to the roundtable, I would suggest that we just leave it as that this is draft and that we're still working on this language. And if folks at the roundtable want to offer some suggestions, then I think we should be open to hearing other thoughts on that. So what was modified last time, or what we've said, is that
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but would it be possible to zoom in a little bit on this text? Please forgive me if my eyes are not as advanced as some others, but I'm having a hard time.
No, I should have asked, is this better or do you need it bigger?
That looks better for me. I don't know about how other folks had.
I'll do it even a little bit bigger.
A little
That
bigger.
looks good to me. Thanks.
So this is a work in progress. We haven't built out all the strategies for all the goals yet. I'm going to first just go through the modifications that were suggested last week at the full meeting. And those were with these other goals, the planning and policy goal. So we already had, although the language, I think that Keith improved the language, participate in the land use matrix working group to influence efforts on affordable housing development. 3 was added to advocate for planning and legislative efforts for MCI Concord Junction Village. So that means that under planning and policy, there are at least 3 kind of key efforts that you are participating in and see yourself participating in the foreseeable future. And then under funding, there was some conversation around the $3 million over 5 years and how to work this. And it was decided that we do at least 3 million over 5 years. And that the first strategy is to continue to advocate for the state approval of your 2 bills, the proposed real estate transfer fee and building permit surcharge legislation, which would providing $2 million per year when passed. I put when passed and not if passed. Hopefully we will see a when. And so we decided to start with that one to cue to the community and to the CPC that the trust is serious about these bills, that the trust knows that there was that it's anticipated that the other resources would be found to help support the trust work. But the second funding goal is to seek a CPA contribution of at least 25% of the annual CPA revenue for the next 3 years to support the work of the trust. So it was decided to put a finite 3 years at this point in hopes that your legislation will be passed. But this is acknowledging that in the meantime, that you need some town contribution through CPA funds in order to be effective moving forward. So a lot of the discussion last week was really around this funding goal, it seems to me. That was my memory. For those who were there last week, do you want to add other comments?
Yeah, if I could, just first, thanks, Shelley, for facilitating our discussions on this. I think it was helpful. I mean, you've been sharing with us that it's important to have a definitive target, dollar target or number of units to make it real, and then to layer it with whatever assumptions we approach. And going back to 2019 town meeting, when the trust was
Being established.
established, we accepted the statute. It took us another 1.5 years to pass a bylaw and get us meeting, but that the deal was in 2019 that the town would file home rule legislation to fund this new entity, the trust, and in the meantime, we would, look to get some money from the town. And since free cash doesn't look like it's in the offing, and we're looking at a goal of getting a quarter of the CPA revenues each year, which is approximately, it's in the ballpark of what we typically get. We've been getting about $500,000 a year. This coming year, we'll get 740,000, which includes 240,000, which is being recycled. It was approved previously for housing. And so that sounded like a good thing. When we get to it, I did want to share on the numerical goal of 200 units that I've had a number of discussions since our last meeting. I talked with the MCI Concord team even earlier today to prepare for the roundtable that's coming up on Monday night at 5 o'clock, where about half of our time together is going to be spent on MCI Concord, because all the pieces that fit together here need to. Could you scroll up to the strategy? Okay, development. Yeah, I'm sorry. Development goal. Create 200 more affordable units, up to 150% of AMI over the next 5 years. That goal does not occur in a vacuum, as we've discussed before. It's that we have 507, we can point to 517 deed restricted affordable units at various levels, up to 80%, 100%, 120%, 150%. And that the numerical, and it just so happens that if we were to have a goal of wanting to achieve 10% affordability, not just countability, but if we wanted to achieve the goal on our own of having 10% of our year-round housing stock be deed restricted as affordable, what would it take, in addition to complying with the Chapter 40B goal, which is that at least 10% of your housing stock needs to be countable on the SHI, and I can put the slides up that we've seen before, but you know that when we reach 16% on our subsidized housing inventory, 16% of the year-round housing stock being countable on the SHI from both of the 40Bs being on that list, only 7% of the year-round housing stock will be deed restricted as affordable. So what we've looked at is going from 7% to 10%, just for the bragging rights and because it's the right thing to do. And the numerical goal to get there is approximately 200. 517, the number we'll start with, that's restricted. Add 200 and you get to 201, you get to 718, which is exactly 10% of a year-round, of the 7,174 year-round housing units. The feedback that I've been getting about having that goal is that having that number out there, and the reason why we're doing it, that we know, because the town's doing 2 once-in-a-generation initiatives. They're doing the reuse of the MCI Concord, and we're doing the land use matrix. So we're just trying to hold up our hands and saying that we want affordable units while
Keith,
that's happening. Yeah.
I'm sorry, this is Stephanie. Just a quick question. When I
Sure.
look at these strategies under the development goal, the strategies in my mind are big and expensive and require a townwide and perhaps state, supported strategy. And these strategies seem to be, they're Concord specific strategies. They're not, in my mind, they're like roundtable strategies as opposed to trust strategies. Does that make
Yes.
sense? And
That's correct.
I love
Yeah.
that they're here.
Yeah.
And I think this document is wonderful. I think it also, especially this development section, is a section that's bigger and broader than the trust.
Oh, absolutely,
How-
it is.
How so?
Yes,
How
absolutely,
so?
because
Well-
we will not
Well-
pay for 200 units.
Exactly right. That's my point. Exactly right. And
We-
so,
But the trust
Through
will
our-
only pay for a portion of it. I mean, the
That's
trust is
right.
never going to be the only funder, but that's how affordable housing development works.
yes,
how
yes,
it's
no, and I
trust-
understand. I'm just saying, what I'm trying to figure out
Yeah.
is to what extent, so for example, one of our guiding principles when we started this group, this ad hoc group, was how do we measure, how do we develop these goals and strategies in a way that's measurable over time? We as the trust will not be able to do this on our own.
Right.
This is the only thing
Absolutely.
we have
That's right.
there. The planning policy bucket, check, we can do that. And we have a very strong kind of opinion leader role in the town as it relates to policy and planning.
Right.
The next one is funding, $3 million. That is solely our leadership role to figure out how to do that. And again, in a, leadership opinion leader role, move the town in a direction to help us fund those dollars. The first one, the development one, is way, way bigger than us. We're stakeholders, we're movers, but the ticket price of 200 plus units is not you know, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about assisting in some dollars and then playing a very strong leadership role in policy and planning and in procuring $3 million. So I guess that to me, it feels like the first one is a town-wide strategy and goal. The next two, the policy planning and the procuring the 3 million, those are solely in our bucket, in our wheelhouse.
Can I just jump in? I think Stephanie's making a really good point here. And I thought when I first read the mission statement, I was struck by the word by leveraging local resources, because to me, that kind of highlighted, no, we can't possibly achieve these goals just by leveraging local resources. That's how I interpreted that. And instead, I think we need to, work with developers and be able to issue RFPs to get people who have access to state and federal subsidies. And,
Well,
go
But
ahead.
that's what the development goal is. It's one, work with the town to create a housing development plan for 2 to 3 municipal sites. That's ultimately releasing a request for proposals to bring in development on those municipal sites.
Then
So
maybe
that could be, and it's uncertain, will that be 40 units? Will it be 130 units? Like, we have no idea because we don't know what sites will be identified. So your
Yes,
role
even-
is not to fund all of it. It's to
Right.
help facilitate
Right.
using municipal land and then subsidizing, having a local contribution so that the developer can access state and federal resources.
right, but I
Exactly.
guess
So
my
if-
point is,
Yeah.
are we responsible for the RFP process? No. Are we responsible for finding, contracting folks or sort of literally leading and implementing a project related to this growth? No.
So the strategy is work with the town. So it's not just the trust, it's the trust participating in that. In some communities, the municipal land has been transferred to the trust and the trust has
Yes.
facilitated that process. That
Yeah.
doesn't look like it will necessarily be the case in Concord, but it could be.
Right. Yeah.
And it
And I
has
guess-
been the case for some smaller projects that CHDC
Yeah.
has advanced. So it's like a tool in the toolkit. I think it is good to sort of speak about both and be really clear about, okay, here's the big goal. It's something that we're asking of the town to prioritize, and not necessarily because the town is going to bankroll all of it, because we know some of it will be private, but also here's the portion that we imagine will involve local funding, and we will advance those.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
Stephanie brought that to our attention in a really helpful way.
Well, and I guess, yeah, and what I'm struggling with too is work with the town to create a housing development plan is planning and policy. That's planning.
But it's for
Well,
the
but we have,
point of.
I guess what I would suggest, I'd suggest there are two opportunities that we have to do that. One is called the MCI Concord.
Yes.
The other is the land use matrix, and that the town itself is providing us the frame where if we were having this discussion and there was no MCI Concord, there was no land use matrix, we would have no business holding up our hand and saying, hey, let's go for 200 more affordable units, because the economy wouldn't be producing that.
Exactly.
But those two initiatives, which the town is undertaking, will produce development. And if so, and if there's, I can't predict how much housing there's going to be in either of those. I'm just assuming there will be housing in the totality, and that most of the development that occurs will occur because of the RFP process that the town or the state goes through, depending upon who the owner is, whether it's and what the requirements are in the zoning that's put in effect for those properties, so
Yeah.
that the market. I mean, I'm hoping that most of the affordable housing that gets produced will be because there's some kind of inclusionary zoning mechanism overlaid on the MCI Concord property, for example, or on 2229 Main Street or wherever it might be, so that our role becomes a local funder who can help leverage local funds as Shelley and Karsten are teaching us,
Okay.
that there needs to be some local money put on the table, and that can be us. And it doesn't have to necessarily be a lot, and it won't even be most of the funding, but that us being a part of a bigger reality is what that's what we're looking to tap into here.
The reason why that strategy 1 is under development is because it's not planning like what you're doing at MCI, where it's really looking at zoning and its modifications. The strategy 1 is where it's doing the feasibility work for development, so it's very development focused. So that's why it's under development. But I think that Edward's been patiently raising his
Oh, yeah,
hand, and should we
yeah,
maybe?
Ed,
I
go
realize
ahead.
I'm not on the committee, but since we're not really in a an open meeting here, I thought I'd make comment.
No, it's a
Mike-
posted meeting of an ad hoc committee.
Well, anyway, I don't mean to interrupt then, but
No, please go ahead, Ed.
yeah, on the mission statement, this is going back to local resources again. Mike Lawson brought up last time, and now Mary and Stephanie brought this up. It seems to be a limiting thing to put local resources in
Yes.
it. And so I think we're better off just taking the word local off. I thought when I saw it again on there that I thought we'd already discussed this last time. And maybe I'm
It would be like using local resources to leverage, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
of course.
it-
That's good.
Hopefully will be local resources.
That's
Yeah,
good.
using our local resources to leverage
Yes.
leverage investment.
Yeah,
And the other-
you're leveraging the local resources to get more resources. So that's why I put the note that this is still being modified, because we did discuss it last week. I meant to do a little bit of work on it before this meeting and I just forgot, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, and it's more, maybe it has to do with whether leveraging is a leverage is a verb that.
Yeah, I'm
that has
using
an
it maybe
object or not.
incorrectly.
I view
Yeah.
it, I view that you use you use a leverage to leverage outside things.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And the second thing is I sit on the CPC, and we have discussed, going ahead to make a larger than our mandatory 10% disbursement for each year's warrant item to housing, but there is resistance to actually putting an actual figure on it.
Right.
CPC has always been generous and given much more than the 10%. But
Right.
so I think there will be, we need to work with the CPC on what we both want, to make sure.
Yeah,
housing
that's a point well
is-
taken. That's a point well
Yep.
taken, Ed. I think that, and I understand why the CPC would not set a goal, but I think we'll set a goal for how they want to disperse the funds. I think we'll want to set a goal for what we're going to ask for.
Huh.
Though,
Yeah.
and they can know that. But also, I really want the whole community to know, in the long term, we're hoping that we can use the the state funding authority to do a real estate transfer fee. So there may come a time when the town could be maybe even limit us to 10% for housing, because we'd have a dedicated source elsewhere, and they could better meet whatever other needs the town has and can't.
And the school board has discovered CPC funding as a way under, open space is where they come in. And I know they're going to come up, depending on the vote on the amenities building, they're going to probably come in with a big request, from CPC, unless the town. I'm thinking the town's not going to approve it on the town meeting that's coming up. So anyway, just
We'll see.
we have competition now, whereas housing has been the major focus in the last few years.
Mhm.
Right. Thanks, Ed.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
I
I
want-
want to go. Okay,
Yeah, I
Pete,
just
go ahead.
I wanted to debrief from a meeting that I had with the MCI team just earlier today. That it would be, when we meet, it would be useful for eventually for the MCI folks to know what specific numerical objectives we have,
Mhm.
and what definitions we're using. So for example, the 200 additional affordable units, it would be helpful for them to know, and hopefully there can be a process by which we identify it, how many of those units might be affordable at up to 80%,
Mhm.
maybe,
Mhm.
or any up to 50%, maybe 150%, whatever it is, to
Mhm.
just to have some structure about that, how much rental, how much ownership.
Mhm.
And given the discussion about what's not in the what that Deaconess is not it's not a housing project, it's a service project. Is there, should we have numerical goals for family housing, senior housing, other categories like that we haven't thought about? So just to put that out there. Thanks. And I saw Matt's hand up.
So first, before we move on, I don't want to just pass off from Stephanie's comments. I'd like to circle back and talk about it just a little bit more, particularly if any of this is being presented at the roundtable on Monday. I think I guess I would ask Stephanie, what would you propose?
Well, I first of all, the development section in my mind is well thought out and it has assumptions that support it and data that support how we got to these numbers. And we talked about it last time too in this meeting. So I think to the extent we review this and keep it relatively like it is, I think we're going to need to be very clear with a roundtable audience, a housing roundtable audience, how we got there and what these goals mean in terms of housing production. Because housing production and the way, that some of the assumptions we have in here, specifically as it relates to MCI Concord, will take it will take a village. It will take, and a lot of the village will be in the roundtable. And so that's kind of how I feel about it, is that's if this was a triangle, like a triangle with the biggest part being on top, the development piece is the biggest goal. This is a townwide big goal, audacious, with once in a generation opportunities for us. Here we go. And it's based on a whole host of really good homework that folks, particularly Keith and others in this group, have done to get those numbers right. And so that to me is the big picture. And everybody needs to, and when I say everybody, I mean housing stakeholders need to really understand what those numbers mean. And then, next is planning and development as it relates to, planning and policy. Planning and policy, our specific role is the trust and what we're going to do to help support this audacious development goal. The third thing, the smaller part of the triangle, is our $3 million. We're going to leverage and be significant players to the extent we can, and our $3 million goes as far as it can go to making sure that this audacious goal happens for in a multi-year way. So that's kind of how I see this. And I think for me, the top one, the first one, is something that really needs a lot of explanation and a lot of buy-in and a lot of, quote, selling to other folks in town.
Okay. And then before we move to other comments, thank you for that, Stephanie. I completely agree. I mean, I know that it feels like a big goal, but I think it's also an important one, and that I appreciate that the willingness of the board to try to take it on. In the interest of time, I just wanted to time check. It's 4:30, and we wanted to talk some about the 19th. And so I just wanted to put out there that because the version that we have here is what went through the full trust board last week, if we get into kind of more comments or modifications, do we want to add things like the MCI? I was thinking with Keith that MCI could be a fourth strategy
I-
in development. Or
Yeah.
do we not want to modify it yet because this is the version before Monday, because this is the version that the full trust board saw?
I have a suggestion. Could you stop sharing for
Yeah.
Shelley? I'm just going to share
Yeah.
one slide because I put a
Yep.
I've come up with a suggested slide for Monday night, and it's this. The
Okay.
mission, a development goal, a planning goal with a bullet that says MCI Concord and land use matrix, and then the funding goal.
So, okay, so simplified, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, because I think because getting into the weeds of particular strategies, which we
Mhm.
will do, I think it's premature to try to sell
Yeah.
those as much as
Yeah.
it is to sell the concept.
Yeah,
This
Yeah.
is just
Yep.
the framework of what we're working in, and the specifics will come out of this.
Okay, great, good. Okay, good. That sounds good to me. So we have had Mary and Matt both raise their hands. Do you want to just,
I'll say
Um,
something quickly. How's that? I think that slide is great for the roundtable. I really do.
Yep.
When we get into the strategies, I have some ideas about the strategies, and I'll just quickly put them out there. One is, you talked about specifying, do we want families or seniors? Can we specify the agricultural community? That's a question. Can we specify a certain, group of people? Because in Concord, we have an agricultural community that's important to us that can't afford to live here. So that's something I'd like us to think about. I don't know if
so you
other,
have to be, so the only thing is that there are federal and state fair housing laws.
Yeah.
And so we have to be careful about how much we single out any group of people because of those laws of that it's illegal to discriminate against protected classes, and that's not actually a protected class. So we just need to be a little bit careful with our language
Some
and
cases,
our
though,
policies because of that.
we're talking about town-owned farms, right?
right, we're talking about
But
town.
that's not MC, but that's, oh, I thought you meant like in reference to
No,
MCI
no,
and so
No,
forth.
no, this is not, no, this is general, just the,
Something
out of
else.
the 200 units, when we're thinking about the strategies, as far as the 200 units, can we specify? It's a question, I don't really know, it's just something that I'm aware of. That the farming community in town has struggles with being able to stay here, stay in their farms. That's my first comment. And my second comment is, when we're looking at the strategies, I would hope that the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust would align their strategies with the select board goals. Because we're in general across town, we're asking boards and committees to align with the select board goals. And if, as you know, in FY25, a select board goal was to increase workforce housing specifically. And we haven't done that this year, but it's a multi-year goal. So I just wanted to remind
Mhm.
people and hope that we keep that in mind. Thank you.
And how does the select board define workforce housing?
Up to 150%.
So that is in line though with your goal, right? That it's up to 150% AMI?
It is, but
Right.
I'm talking about
Yeah,
when we
we
get
just,
to
we
strategies.
haven't produced anything yet. I mean,
Yeah.
we got, we have an
Yeah.
ARPA grant from the town that we can use up to 120% of AMI, and we intend to do so on a piece of surplus state property by the
But
end of
I'm
2026.
talking more broadly about
Yeah.
not just that particular parcel. I know what you're talking about, Keith, but I'm
Yeah.
talking about broadly. We wanted,
Mhm.
the select board is very clear that we wanted to see some progress in the workforce space. And so I would like to keep that in mind when we do our strategies. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, yep,
Thank
great.
you.
Matt?
Yeah, so I don't know how to break this up, but I really love the 200 units as a top-down goal, long-term goal. But realistically, over 5 years, I went through the list, MCI, Junction Village, the town parcels. I can't get to 200 units in the next 5 years. I just, I get to a little over 100, maybe. I'm just wondering if a more realistic goal for this period, even if we have the long-term, North Star of get to the full 10%, is really 100 units, because 200 units, I mean, if we don't, our progress in the past has been abysmal. And, we hopefully can make better progress, but it's not like we're going to snap our fingers and suddenly become great at this. In fact, inclusionary housing is suffering right now because of high development costs. And as you might have seen in a recent Boston Globe article, other towns are looking at rolling back some of their criteria for inclusionary zoning in order to at least get some units to get built. And
What
we're
if,
seeing Novo,
yeah,
stopped too. I mean, it's just,
right.
we got to get stuff built.
What if it were longer than 5 years? Because I'm
Well,
very
I think
fond
that
of
it's great to
200.
say the North Star goal.
Yeah.
And then
Well, I
say
mean, do
in
we
the
say
next
that's
5
the
years,
goal for
100
10
units,
years or 7
something
years?
like that. I just feel like it needs to reflect what we practically think could happen, because I don't think 200 units can happen that are truly affordable units, unless you find sites that I don't know about.
Well,
Matt,
MCI
can I ask a
Concord,
clarifying question regarding your number crunching?
Yeah.
Are you assuming a certain zoning density for these?
Yeah, so I'm assuming, let's say we have 200 units at MCI, and out of those, 20 are affordable. Okay. What? Yeah, Mary's shaking her head. You think 500 units?
At least.
yeah,
At least 500 units.
yep.
Okay, well, that'll
Yeah.
help.
I
But,
think looking
it's
at
still
greater
not
zoning
200. It
density
doesn't get us
being-
to 200 affordable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the governor's going to insist. It's going
Yeah.
to be a big number.
Yeah.
And so that's what caught my attention. If it's going to be a big number, and if you haven't looked at it, take a look at there's the May 5th workshop of the MCI Concord group on the town's U2 account. Excellent it's well worth your taking an hour and seeing the presentations that they did and all the slides that they had around the assumptions that they're approaching here. And there's some big numbers that they're looking at in order to make it viable.
Because beyond MCI Concord, it's about what, 50 units, 60 that could be put together through town-owned parcels,
Well,
zoning.
we were going to have 82 units in your neighborhood at
82
Junction
units.
Village.
Oh, you
The
mean
12-acre Junction
assisted living.
Village, so we don't know, so.
I think part of it is that there's a lot of
Affordable.
uncertainty. We don't know
weren't
yet.
82 affordable units. We're counting affordable units here.
No, they would all have satisfied up to 150% of AMI,
Right.
which is the definition that the CHDC goes by. So I just, with 63 acres there, and something's going to happen. It may even be a conservative goal, I think, to say 200 affordable units.
Huh.
I think just for clarity for Matt, that when Keith is saying the affordable under 200 units, it's not 80% AMI. He's talking 150%
Sure, I
AMI.
understand that, but even
Okay,
that,
good. Okay.
I'd be surprised.
Yeah,
but-
Matt wrote a proposed zoning amendment just on that point. Yeah,
Got
up
it.
to 150, yeah.
Okay.
This may be, real quick, I'm just gonna bring it up, we can talk about it next time, and maybe somebody can just send me a quick email. MBTA communities, is that, where does that stand? Is there a quick, just, is that something, because we don't.
It does not include, it includes Junction Village. It does not, in the district, it does not include MCI Concord. The zoning is in effect. It was approved by the Attorney General last August, and there have been no takers yet. And feedback is that it may not until I was told that Lexington's experience was that they didn't get takers until they achieved EOHLC compliance in addition to Attorney General approval, two-step process,
That makes sense.
which probably affects
Mhm.
whether anyone's gonna put any money on the table. Right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I wanted to make
We're
two,
about a year away
Right,
from
but it's in our 5-year plan.
HLC approval.
2 points I wanted to make was first, I really like the strategies. And since Stephanie had mentioned that you really looked at data to inform those strategies, I'll be curious. It doesn't necessarily have to be for everybody, but maybe you could share the background that informed how you determine numbers like the ownership versus the lower 50% AMI units. Like just looking at them, I'm like, oh, those numbers look good to me, but it's a gut feeling. I'd love to know how it's connected to the data. And the second point that came to mind that is somewhat relevant, and we've referred to it earlier in the meeting, is this citizens petition for the 12-acre site that's previously owned by Emerson Hospital, but is now owned by Deaconess. They're proposing, I saw their presentation short time ago, maybe a week or so ago, and they're proposing, I think, 16 units per acre.
Yes,
Yeah, a
There's
total
the
of
same- yeah,
hundred and
the same as-
ninety-four.
The
zoning
same as their
density.
current-
yes.
Yeah, the
And-
same as their current one across the street.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there would be up to 19 units that could come out of that.
Yeah, the trick there is the affordability piece.
What is it? Yeah.
I,
Yeah. Well,
I don't think they're going to be on the SHI.
I-
It might
No.
be-
Oh,
No,
definitely
it
not.
won't be.
The-
It won't be. It's not a housing
Yeah,
project. it's a
exactly.
service project.
But yeah, I don't think this
I'm gonna have to
SHI goals, but
I
I
have
think,
to,
think from the
I'm gonna
depth
have to
of-
go and make sure Assabet gets snow and ice plowing over at the
Oh.
works
Yes,
commission meeting.
thank you.
Okay,
So
So
can we
anyhow-
actually, to wrap up, can Keith and I, can we talk about a next ad hoc meeting for Monday? If we just propose the slide that you have, kind of
That's
the
good.
framework that we have now and to get feedback for that. If this group can plan on for our next meeting, let's dig into development strategies. Specifically, let's talk about what you want to request for MCI and get a little bit more specific around some of those numbers. So if you try to do some interim kind of work on that, I think that'd be fantastic. I'll work a little bit more on the mission statement so we can also review that next time so that we have a new kind of additional work to show the full trust board in June. Does that work?
Thanks,
Great.
Shelley.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
and so we will have another meeting. I'll get back to you, and we'll get back to you on when that is, Shelley.
Yep.
And we'll see you at our roundtable
On Monday.
Okay, very good.
Good.
Great, appreciate that. And I think, any public comment? I didn't think so. So is there a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Second.
Second.
Motion by Mary, second by, we'll give it to Julie. And on that motion, Mary,
Aye.
Stephanie,
Aye.
Julie,
Aye.
and Keith, aye. And motion passes and we are adjourned at 4:44 PM.